8:30, we should probably get started. I would like to welcome everybody to OLLI at the University of South Dakota. I think that everybody here with us today, as far as I can tell, are South Dakotans, so we're glad to have you back, have you join us today for our OLLI short with the South Dakota Discovery Center. We're going to be talking about science today. I wanted to let you know we have these programs every weekday during the month of February, except for this coming Monday, because that's the President's Day holiday, and Stacy and I are going to be at home, probably resting. We will have Q&A at the end of the session. If you have some questions, feel free to put them in the chat if you'd like, or you can save your questions for the end. We'll have time to unmute. We will do our best to end by 1 o'clock. And I would like to thank the South Dakota Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities for their sponsorship of this program and making this possible. So I would like to welcome Ria from the South Dakota Discovery Center. Let's talk science.
Well, thank you so much, Thea. And thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you. Some of you might know me already. I'm the Executive Director of the Discovery Center. And we have been trying to do a little bit more programs for adults because adults are curious and adults want to hear about science too. We've done some virtually last year, and now we're trying to ramp it up again a little bit. And so our program, what we're doing is Discovery on Tap. And I'm gonna, if I can, share my screen here. If Thea, if you would let me, or whoever is the host, let me share my screen. That will be fantastic because it's always nice to have some visuals with that. So the idea of Discovery on Tap is have a conversation over maybe a hot beverage, maybe a cold beverage, your beverage of your choice, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that you get an opportunity to actually talk to a scientist. And so that is the big thing that the Discovery on Tap session is going to be. It is hands-on science and really interactive. And so even though I appreciate that introduction of save your questions for last, honestly, this can be an interaction, and this can be, you can ask questions and interrupt me anytime. And actually, this is very interactive. So I want to make sure that you are all engaged, and I would encourage you to be on camera so that I can see you, but at least unmute yourself because I want to hear from you while we're going through this. I thought the best idea to show you a little bit about our Discovery on Tap is doing a little Discovery on Tap. And so the sneak into science is actually sneaking into my past and sneaking into what I have been doing because I am a scientist by training. And I worked on something that is hidden behind my little red dot there because that's what I did for about 10 years of my life. Sitting in the darkness, looking at a red light. And you might wonder, why would you do that? Well, there was something behind the red light. And that was, if I get my, here.
Oh, I love bats.
Not everyone does though, but I am a bat scientist. I was actually looking at how bats are flying, and because they're nocturnal, I tricked them into shifting them. So their nights were their days and my days were their nights. And so I was sitting during the day, but in the darkness so that they were adapted to it. And so I want to ask all of you, what is the first image that comes to mind when you hear bat? Does every one of you have something in their mind? It could be something like that, because this is how bats are often depicted in stories, in even science education. For the longest time, it's those scary nightmares of nature. I'm like, oh my goodness. A lot of people have a fear of bats, and that's absolutely normal, because for the longest time, when we think about bats, we think about Dracula and all of the bad things, right? I like it. The bats are fine outside. Also a very good one. So oftentimes we think about bats as this kind of crazy, not great, kind of a, oops, what is it doing here? So the kind of this monster, right? But obviously bats are not like this. They're also not like that. That's a little too cute, but they're somewhere in the middle, like these. So these fellows are some of the bats. By the way, I have a lot of pictures that were taken by Merlin Tuttle, who is kind of the bat whisperer in our worlds. He has been taking amazing pictures of trying to capture the character of bats in their portrait. So here are two different kinds of bats, and you might know that there are bats that are the microbats that use echolocation, have small ears, small eyes, really big ears, and usually big noses. Those are the ones that echolocate. And then there are the ones that are the flying foxes, the macrobats, that have big eyes and look more like dogs. So anyway, that's more what bats look like. But oftentimes you don't see those nice pictures that Merlin Tuttle took, who is a bat whisperer and takes really good care of what does that look like? How do I present bats and take the picture? Oftentimes you see that. I think a lot of pictures is what you see is this. And sometimes you got to step back and look at the big picture, because this picture and pictures like this were taken in this setting. When are you taking pictures of bats? When you capture them. They're scared for their life and they're trying to fight their way out. They're those tiny creatures in big hands. We're scary. They want to get away from us. So obviously, when you hold them tight and they're afraid, the picture that you will get is not going to be a pleasant one. If someone holds you down and tries to take a picture, you're not going to smile, right? So I'm in the same mind frame as Merlin Tuttle, trying to tell people a different picture of bats. And so I want to do a little trivia with you and see how much do you know about bats. So again, please unmute yourself and let's do a little trivia here. So it's always two choices, A or B. In this case, what about, are all bats blind or can bats see? Who thinks A, who thinks B? Just say
B.
A or B.
B.
B?
B.
B. Okay, good. We have some other ones. So obviously all bats can see. I already mentioned some of them have smaller eyes that are the echolocating bats, but even the ones with the smaller eyes that can echolocate, even though they don't need their eyesight, they can absolutely see. And obviously the ones with the big eyes, they can see as well. All bats can see. Fantastic. Leroy, I see you taking pictures. I'm happy to share the presentation with you afterwards.
Oh, thank you. I teach a variety of classes like for South Dakota Rockhounds, and I always share my slides in the download file in the chat. Because people get a little overwhelmed when you go through bunches and bunches of
stuff. Oh, absolutely. I know. And I have good pictures in there.
Just go out there and thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So let's try another question. Less of 1% of bats have rabies, or do all bats have rabies, right? That's a big thing, rabies in bats. So who thinks A?
A.
Who thinks B? Very good. Less than 1% of all bats have rabies. So when you encounter a bat, it's very likely that they do not have rabies, although the ones that do have rabies are the ones that are weaker. So why would you catch a bat? They might be sick. So definitely it is not as terrible that you think whenever you see a bat, you're going to get rabies. But do you ever want to hold them in the hand like that? No, right? They bite. Again, you saw that picture of that bat really fierce and afraid. Bats are afraid. So even if you're trying to help them, always make sure that you either don't handle them at all or wear really thick gloves. I worked with bats for a long time and I got bitten a lot and it hurts. It really hurts. Another one. What about A, bats are extremely clean, or B, bats are dirty? We often think about them kind of like rats, right? We're like, are they dirty? So who thinks A?
A.
Who thinks B? Very good. I love that. Bats are actually extremely clean. They lick themselves clean, just like cats or dogs. They're mammals. They're really trying to keep clean. And the main thing is they have to fly. So just imagine all that weight. If you get sticky and the fur gets icky, the wings can stick together. So they have to keep extremely clean. So it's not like when you see them, they're like crawling with little bugs or anything. It's not the case. I mentioned bats are often kind of referred to flying rodents. So A, are bats flying rodents, or B, are bats not rodents? Now we're getting a little trickier. Who thinks A?
A.
Who thinks B?
B.
Okay, good. We have a little bit of people think differently. So actually bats are not closely related to rodents at all. Bats are in the order Chiroptera, which means hand wing. Kind of makes sense, right? And they're actually more closely related to cats and dogs, cows, and horses than they are to rodents, which is really interesting. So not rodents at all, completely different. What about this one? Do bats attack people, A, or do bats avoid people? Who thinks A? Who thinks B?
B.
B.
Yeah, very good. Bats absolutely avoid people. They're super shy. They're trying to get away from you. So the only time that bats are flying in your hair is when you see something like that. So usually, right, there's always this, they're flying in my hair. They would not do that if they are trying to get away from you. Again, if a bat is ever caught in your house and it's trying to fly away and you're gesturing, they might end up bouncing against you because there's not enough space for them to get away, but they would definitely not try to attack or anything like that. Another one, vampire bats. So A, only very few vampire bats drink blood from humans, or do you think all bats suck blood? Who thinks A?
A.
A.
Who thinks B? Fantastic. Yes, there's actually only 3 species out of the more than 1,200 species of bats that are vampire bats that drink blood. And that's another thing. There's actually been some research done where there was a researcher that was trying to see if a bat would drink blood from him, because usually it's cows or pigs.
Right.
So he held very, very still, and he was in, I think it was in Ecuador. So he was sitting there at night together with some livestock and offering himself to bats, to vampire bats. And he said, it hurt like hell. I mean, they did it, but he said it usually shouldn't happen that bats would drink humans' blood because it hurts. Like you feel it. It's not like they can just sneak up on you and drink blood. So it's a really interesting thing. And then I want to ask one more question of you and see if you know that one. Ugh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Are bats a nuisance? What do you think? Or are bats beneficial? Who thinks A? Who thinks B?
B.
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 There we go. Very good. We're a little torn here. So bats are actually beneficial. Why? They eat mosquitoes. Actually, one bat can eat about somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 insects in one night. They eat things like mosquitoes, they eat beetles, they eat flies, and they eat crop pests. So they're actually really, really helpful. If you have bats in your yard, you can count yourself lucky because very likely you have fewer mosquitoes than others because they're going to eat them away from you. The other thing is, so the insect-eating bats are what we have around here, but further south, more in the tropics, there are bats that feed from nectar. They have long tongues so that they can actually go all the way down into the deepest inserts of some of the big flowers that they have in the tropics. And so they pollinate. We often only think about butterflies or bees or other insects as pollinators. Bats actually are pollinators. They pollinate flowers such as banana, mango, avocado, and cashew. So if you eat any of those, without bats, you wouldn't be able to. Those are sometimes the sole pollinators of some of those flowers because their really long tongues have co-evolved with some of those flowers to only be pollinated by bats. No one else can reach down there. And they also eat fruit and that way drag around some of those seeds. So seed dispersal of pineapple, fig, and also mango is something that bats are doing. And it's very funny because sometimes bats can get their mouth full, a little too full as well. So I hope that I gave you a little bit of an insight of bats, and I'm very happy to take lots of questions. The one thing that I want to end with is bats are really beneficial. They're under threat from a lot of different things that we might not think about. There is a fungus, which is the white nose syndrome, that is decimating bat populations, but there's even things like cats that are catching bats once in a while. Deforestation is huge for bats and building houses because they live in them. If we tear down old bridges, they often live in those crevices. If we tear them down, there's no habitat for them. And bats actually can get hurt by wind farms. It's very interesting because researchers have noticed that there were bats lying in front of wind turbines without outside damage. And they're like, what is going on here? Apparently the pressure from the wind turbines, there's low pressure in front of them, and that implodes the lungs of the bats. So it's not even that they fly into it, they fly past it, and because of the pressure difference, they just drop dead out of the sky. And there's even sometimes sticky. So I just want to tell you, bats are our friends, and we may want to think about them a little differently. So please come with questions.
Why do they hang upside down?
This is a very, very good question. So bats' knees are turned upside down. So their knees bend backwards. And so that is an evolutionary step to make them be able to, while they're flying, turn upside down and then hang. I don't know why they started to hang. I'm assuming because they just try to save weight in the legs. If you want to stand upside or use your legs, there's muscle, which is heavy. Bats are very small and maneuverable. And so when you're flying, you try to reduce weight. So I think in the evolutionary process, there was just this, let's not use our legs. So if we reduce our muscles in the legs, how can we sleep? Well, upside down hanging doesn't need a lot of muscle. So that was probably one of the things. And then their knees turned inside out, so to speak. And so they can curl inside out with their knees and hang and without actually using any energy.
Are there any new apps for your phone or something like that that can help you detect what kind of bats you have? I used to work with bats at my old job, and we had a bat detector, and it would make a series of clicks, and you could tell from the length of the click what kind of bat it was. But it was a very primitive machine, you know. Have they improved on that? Are there apps now that do that?
So that's a very good question. And honestly, I'm not sure if there's apps that use bat detectors. It would be fantastic if they do that, because it's if you have those bat detectors, you know, again, the clicks kind of, you can tell some bats are a little harder to tell apart, but a lot of bat species you can tell apart by just listening to those clicks, those echolocation noises that they're making. I know that generally when it comes to looking at any wildlife, plants, animals, anything, iNaturalist is a fantastic app to just post a picture and say, this is what I'm seeing. But obviously with bats in the darkness, it would make a lot of sense to just identify with the clicks. So that is a very good question. And now I'm really curious and I will look into that, because I do not have that answer for you yet.
Thanks. I'm going to start looking too. I didn't even think about it until now.
Leroy.
Yeah, there's an interesting Facebook group, and the South Dakota Plants and Wildlife.
Yeah.
They have some serious experts there, like Owen, I think it's McElroy, and it's a private group now, but it was a public one. They started out like 100 people. Now they have like 8,000 people, and they're always really good about answering questions about plants and wildlife.
Thank you for that. Awesome. What other questions do you have for me? What do you always wanted to ask a scientist when she comes along and tells you weird things about bats?
Could you download the file into there's a little file icon with a dog eared there?
Hold on one second. I'll work on that while you ask me more questions.
What kind of, you worked here in South Dakota, or where did your work take place?
I did my dissertation in Sweden. So I was working on, so most of my life was spent in wind tunnels. Basically, if you think about, we put cars in wind tunnels to see, are they aerodynamic? How does the wind flow over them? Can we make them faster? Well, bats are not so concerned about the fastness, but what I was researching was looking at, how does the energy flow in bats? How much energy do they take in? How do they convert it? How are they moving their wings as they're flying? Because their wings are so much more adjustable, so to speak, than birds. Bats are mammals just like us, so their wings are their hands. So they have all 5 fingers, and they have the entire joints that we have too, and they can actuate all of them. They can bend all of the joints just like we, which is really interesting for a wing. And so I was looking more at that piece. So I was working in places that had wind tunnels and bat research. So I did my work in Sweden. I was at Brown University for a while. I was at Iowa State for a little bit, but more moving into butterflies and other flying things. But I was kind of all over the place. So I wasn't outside, I was inside with my bats. And I worked on tropical bats because they are the ones that feed on nectar. And so I could train them to go to the feeder every time, and had all my cameras set up for the spot. So that was working a little bit on that.
That sounds like so much fun. I only ever worked with red bats and brown bats, little brown bats.
Nice. They're very cute though.
Oh my gosh, their little faces are like teddy bears. They're adorable.
I like the fact they eat thousands of mosquitoes.
Yeah.
One morning we had a bat hanging from about 6 foot high in our locust tree out in front. And I called the neighbor lady and her son over, and the boy was going to kill him. I said, no, they eat thousands of mosquitoes. So made sure that he didn't end the poor little bat's life. And is there a way we can, are there bat houses, like bird houses, that we can encourage bats into our neighborhood?
Absolutely. So that is a fantastic way. And if you've been on La Framboise in the last 4 years, they've actually put some bat houses up there, right there around that shelter. So Game Fish and Parks has put those up, and they're really fantastic. First of all, you can see they're on high poles. They're really, really high up, which one of the reasons is it makes it, just putting up a bat house doesn't do it. You got to know where to put them because they can overheat. You have to make sure that there's no predators that can come in. So there's a lot of things to that, but absolutely. And I'm happy to share a couple of resources around that on where you can find information about bat houses. There's even some instructions on how to build your own. There's obviously also some where you can just buy one, but also get information about how to hang them up. So I will put those two in the chat here.
Okay, we have a pair of great horned owls in our neighborhood.
Fantastic.
I'm assuming that wouldn't be too conductive for bats.
You know what? There's a lot of bats though, and there's this one owl, and the owl will probably be very happy. Honestly, I mean, that's the thing. This is life, right? You will see if they come or if they argue together. I'm sure.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's probably some bats that fall to the owl and become the prey, but there's still both of them around. So I put it in a couple. Go ahead. Sorry.
Bats out of your house.
I'm sorry. What was that?
How do you keep bats out of your house?
Oh, that's a very good question. So generally, bats only come into your house if there's something really weird going on. If you have crevices, like in your attic, they will love to go there because that's a nice spot where they're safe from other predators. So that's one thing. Make sure that you have your roof in good shape, because if there is a spot for them that is quiet and warm and safe, they will go there. Otherwise, like flying into windows, if you have small openings, but really small ones where only bats can come through, but for example, no cat, they might think, oh, it's warm in there, it's dark in there, I crawl in there at night, especially young males during, I think it's in the early summer, when they're looking for new roosting places because they get kicked out of the colony. It can happen that they actually go into windows and try to make a new home in your place. So generally, keep your windows closed at night, make sure that there aren't little crevices. But then the other thing is, if a bat comes into your home, close the door to the inside of the house, open the window wide, turn the light on. I'm sure they will try to get out if they can, because they don't want to be there with you.
My neighbor across the street, they had to have the bat removal police come and get them. But they estimated they had over 1,000 bats in their attic.
Cool.
I'm sure over time, right? There's a colony. That's the thing. Colonies can be really large, can be thousands of bats.
Of course, when they emptied that one out,
yeah,
they just moved next door to the next house. So we all had to have the bat people come and do, like, we only ended up with probably 15 in our garage attic. So we were lucky, but other people were getting them coming into the house, and it's like, it was just a mess.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a huge mess, and it's nice habitat for them, but obviously at some point we can't keep that up. So it's really good though to have a professional trying to relocate the bats rather than trying to fix it, and then you trap them inside, then they die. There's lots of things with it, but yeah, it happens.
And bats are mammals. They're like us. They have babies that drink milk, and they have hair on their skin and backbones. People don't always realize that. We had a lot of people ask us, do bats lay eggs?
No, they don't.
Right.
They carry their young and they give birth upside down, which is really stupid to do that against gravity, but they do. That's what they do. They are giving birth while they're hanging upside down and then catch them in their wings, which is very adorable to watch.
Do they leave the young behind and then come back and feed them, or do they take the young with them?
When they're really young, they fly with them. So mothers can carry huge loads because the young ones are about up to 2/3 of the size of the mother until when they're still carried around. Then they will leave them behind. And that's because they often live in big colonies, especially maternal colonies. You have a couple of bats that go out, a couple that stay back. It's really interesting. There's a lot of altruism with bats, that they're helping each other, even if they're not related, within a colony to help each other out. So bats are pretty fascinating creatures. I put in a couple of, so the first two links that I put in are more about bat houses and conservation efforts. The other ones are just generally, about bats, especially in this area. Game Fish and Parks has nice information about bats, and the website of Merlin Tuttle if you want to see amazing bats from all over the world and what their faces look like. So I thought I'd share that.
I had no idea you were going to talk about bats today. I can't tell you how much you made my day.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so excited. So the big thing about this is, this is what a scientist on tap can look like. For me, it's bats. We have people that we invite. So in March, we wanted to start in January, got delayed because of COVID. In March, every third Friday, happy hour at 5:30, we're going to be at the St. Charles in Pier. If you are there and want to have a drink with us and chat, but we're also trying to do a live stream so that everyone can be a part of that. And I will make sure to share that all with Thea so that she can share that with you guys. But it's always, there is a scientist, it's a conversation, there's a little bit of a presentation, but very interactive. And then it's you asking a question and guiding it. So the one in March, we're going to talk about the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope and a little bit about astronomy. So if you're interested in space and what's out there, that is a very good one. So the third Friday of every month is how we're going to do this, starting in March and then going all the way through the year.
That sounds like so much fun. That's in Pier at the St. Charles Hotel.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. If anybody on here, I think we're all South Dakotans on here, but if you're from out of state, that's Pier, not Pierre, in our state capital in South Dakota, right in the middle of our state.
And again, we're trying to do that all virtually so that no matter where you are, you can at least listen in and learn a little more about science and scientists that we have in the state and what they're doing.
Let us know. I will put it in the newsletter, and believe me, I'll be there. That's my kind of thing.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for the slide file. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Kathy's clapping. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We will be back next week, starting on Tuesday of next week. And our first session is going to be, this is a really good one. Tell your friends about it. The story behind the song. This is a Simon and Garfunkel expert here in South Dakota. She knows more about Simon and Garfunkel than you even knew there was to know. She's going to tell us the story behind the song, The Sound of Silence. So that's going to be a really good one. We've got some other great stuff next week, 12:30 Central. We will see you at the same link. And Rhea, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.